memory. The CCP feared that if the content were leaked, the United States would discover Xi Jinping's strategic blueprint. However, some conscientious CCP insiders who read the document memorized the key points and passed them on to Professor Yuan, who made them public. The 7,000-word document is titled, "Win the Initiative in Historic Upheaval Through Decisive Struggle." It declares that the tariff war is not an isolated economic dispute, but the first battle in a total war launched by Trump, encompassing politics, economics, military force, and ideology. The leadership sees the tariff war as an opportunity to break the United States' global dominance and calls on the entire party, the entire military, and the nation to follow Xi Jinping's directives in this effort. So the document spells out 5 strategies, which I'm going to tell you about. First is International United Front strategy. Top priority is to build a global united front, leveraging international frustration over Trump's trade war. Target countries are Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and China's neighboring countries. And if Trump refuses to back down, pull India and Vietnam and other swing states, well, in this case, swing states are not states, swing countries, shall we say. So if he refuses to back down, so pull India and Vietnam and other swing nations into a coalition to isolate the United States. And the goal is to push the US out of the globalization process and end its economic dominance. And the United Front Work Department and Foreign Ministry must coordinate this effort. That's strategy number 1. Strategy number 2 is based on 2 major financial war plans. Okay, this is crucial. This one is really an important one. So plan 1, so financial war number 1, targets Chinese political elites' foreign assets. Okay, so strategy number 2 includes 2 major financial wars. And the first war targets Chinese elites. So it says that the government must keep track of foreign bank deposits held by party officials and executives working for SOEs, state-owned enterprises, especially those exceeding $200,000. And it says, if full decoupling with the United States is triggered, funds must be immediately transferred out of the United States and back to China or other neutral countries. And this can be handled by family members of the officials. It doesn't have to be the officials themselves. It could be handled. The transferring of the funds out of the United States can be handled by family members. And then, listen to this, non-compliance would be treated as treason and punished harshly. So that's plan number 1 under this strategy number 2. Plan number 2, or financial war number 2, involves full financial decoupling readiness. So it says officials are asked to be thoroughly prepared on short notice to dump $1 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds, and 2, sell $2 trillion in U.S. corporate equity and debt securities in the shortest amount of time possible when the government decides to do it. And the objective is to destabilize U.S. financial markets if needed. That's strategy number 2. Strategy number 3 is about domestic measures for a prolonged economic war with the United States. So it requires officials to strengthen China's ability to be economically self-reliant and enhance a domestic market circulation system. It's called 内循环. In response to Trump's national emergency declaration, Chinese officials at all levels must prepare for severe hardship and be ready to partially or fully restore government rationing system. It's the system where everybody is allocated some, like a fixed amount of grains and vegetables and meat, and sometimes oil, cooking oil. So everything is based on a rationing system. I think it's ration. Yeah, ration, not ration. Okay, so the secret document refers to rationing as China's secret weapon in winning the economic war with the US. So Professor Yuan commented on that. He said, this shows the CCP is retreating into the historical dead end of total control, but still calls it a winning strategy. I mean, this is what China went through in the 70s, right? After the Cultural Revolution, when China's economy was totally decimated. China went through a decade of rationing. So the CCP is preparing the entire country to go back to that. Strategy number 4 addresses international politics. So the document instructs the International Liaison Department and the Foreign Ministry to deepen strategic partnership with Russia, Iran, and North Korea, forming the political foundation to counter Trump's challenge. It also calls for strengthening CCP influence in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Thailand, across political, military, economic, and cultural domains. Referencing Marxist idea that economic power shapes political power, it urges officials to exploit rising anger in Europe and Canada toward Trump's trade war to divide and weaken NATO, thereby undermining US global leadership. Simultaneously, the CCP aims to weaken US ties with Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, with the goal to push the US into economic isolation and losing its status as, quote unquote, the global police. The end goal is to bring down the 80-year American dominance that began after World War II. The last strategy is in the realm of military struggle, and this one involves Taiwan. The document asserts that if the economic war intensifies, a military confrontation becomes inevitable. The CCP must seize the initiative and choose the battlefield. And Xi Jinping believes a war in the Taiwan Strait gives China, or will give China, the geographical advantage, because China will have a home court advantage. The resolution or the document, the secret document is called a resolution. So it's the same thing. So the document demands full implementation of Xi Jinping's strategic vision, which is to prepare for a military showdown with the United States in the Taiwan Strait. And in terms of Xi Jinping's war plan for the Taiwan Strait, according to the document, the war Xi Jinping envisions would be described as the following. Okay, so let me read you the vision, the type of war that he envisions. It's called a new type of conventional war, fought under full spectrum information warfare, backed by a credible nuclear deterrent. Okay, let me read that again. A new type of conventional war, fought under full spectrum information warfare. Well, this sounds awkward. Maybe it's not translated right. Fought under a full spectrum information warfare. Maybe that sounds better. Backed by a credible nuclear deterrent. And if the US intervenes, the plan is to destroy US military bases in Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and Guam. Force US forces to retreat east of Hawaii, effectively reducing the US to a regional power rather than a Pacific hegemon. By the way, this description of the war matches with the doomsday scenario described by a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel who was quoted in the 1945 article. It's not the year 1945. It was a military website called 1945. They published an article that predicts an imminent war within the next 6 months. And I mentioned it in my April 8th program. You can check it out. So, I mean, in that program, I mentioned three scenarios. And so this description from the secret document matches with the last scenario described in the 1945 article. So the resolution, the CCP's resolution or the secret document's final declaration is this. It says, only by bravely facing the storm can we achieve great victory. It concludes that by defeating Trump's total offensive, beginning with the tariff war, the CCP's vision of a community of common destiny will become the global path forward. So the above are key contents of the internal document as reconstructed from memory by Professor Yuan's contact. So now let's talk about the reaction within the party and also Xi Jinping's biggest fear. So quoting insiders from within the regime, Professor Yuan said this. Okay, so this is what he said. He said, the CCP hoped this resolution would stabilize internal morale after the shock of Trump's tariff war. But the result was the opposite. Once the document was delivered through the strict classified procedure to officials at the county and division level and above, it didn't calm nerves. It was like pouring cold water into boiling oil. It sparked a wave of extreme anxiety throughout the bureaucracy. Well, imagine those officials who have children and assets in the United States, right? Now need to not only disclose their assets to the party, but also are required to sell them or at least move them elsewhere. And if they don't follow the directive, they will be charged with treason. I'd say this rule affects 80 to 90% of the officials who read the document, because most of them have sent money elsewhere. So this is effectively turning all of them against the leadership. Professor Yuan's contact said that the new political whispers in Beijing have spread rapidly in Beijing's political circles. And the prevailing view is this. So the prevailing view is saying that Xi Jinping's so-called decisive great struggle against Trump may turn out to be his final unfinished project, a catastrophic failure. And once that fails, it may also mark the collapse of the party and the end of the regime. So why did Xi Jinping respond so aggressively to Trump's tariff war? The answer lies in Xi Jinping's biggest fear. According to Yuan's contact, it's because his think tanks convinced him that if he backs down on tariffs, the United States and its allies will reopen the investigation into China's role in the COVID pandemic and push for crime, push to charge the leadership or maybe Xi Jinping himself for crimes against humanity and demand economic reparations, right? So not only Xi Jinping may be charged for crimes against humanity, the regime there will be economic reparations. That, insiders said, is Xi Jinping's biggest fear. This is his is that what you call the Achilles heel, or the Achilles heel, not hills, not mountains, but heels. So after all, it was Xi Jinping's personal directive in the early 2020 that delayed public health responses in Wuhan, allowing the virus to spread across China, then the world. And that's the liability he fears most. So among China's economic and foreign policy technocrats, there is widespread skepticism and ridicule about Xi Jinping's strategy to build an international coalition, including Europe, Japan, Australia, to isolate the United States. Privately, many consider Xi Jinping's strategy delusional and out of touch with reality. It's comparable to Mao Zedong's failed dream during the Cultural Revolution of creating a United Nation that excluded the US. These people, these technocrats, believe Xi Jinping's plan will become a historic embarrassment with no chance of success. At present, Beijing's political atmosphere is steeped in despair. Officials are quietly warning that Trump's tariff shockwave could lead to a tsunami of unemployment crisis by this summer. That's what they're saying. This is not what Professor Yuan is saying. This is from these Chinese technocrats. And they say in 2024, less than 1/3 of China's college grads found a job. The rest were stuck in temporary, low-paid jobs or simply unemployed. In 2025, this summer, another 12 million graduates are expected to enter the job market. So these officials fear that jobless college grads, combined with tens of millions of unemployed migrant workers, could create the first major storm triggered by the tariff war, one that could overwhelm CCP's social stability control mechanisms. The growing whisper believes that Xi Jinping's final fallback strategy is to return to a Cultural Revolution-style command economy, reviving a wartime supply rationing system, and ultimately launching a war against Taiwan as a last-ditch effort to escape economic collapse. But among officials, there's a grim consensus. These moves amount to political suicide. Because reinstating state-controlled rationing system would only lead to severe hardship and social decay, right? It could only aggravate the public's long-suppressed fury. As for a war over Taiwan, these insiders say Xi Jinping's greatest danger would not come from the United States, but from within the PLA itself. According to a princeling familiar with internal military sentiment, many mid and high-ranking PLA officers are eagerly waiting for Xi Jinping to start a war, not to defend him, but to use the chaos as an opportunity to stage a coup. So they see a wartime scenario as their best chance to eliminate Xi. This, Professor Yuan concludes, is the real fallout triggered by that secret document. So, okay, so that's everything I want to tell you from this revelation. Now, I think the information Professor Yuan disclosed is consistent with my previous analysis of CCP's strategies, right? What I call its playbook to counter the tariff war. It also matches with the latest development in China in the past week or two. A Reuters report on April 13th titled "How China Went from Courting Trump to Never Yield Tariff Defiance" claimed that Beijing has placed civilian officials on wartime footing, ordering officials at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Commerce to cancel all leave, keep their phones on 24/7, and remain on standby to respond to escalating trade tensions. This total war directive or directives also match with a recent escalation a series of recent events uh, with the narrative of a Taiwan unification. In the past couple of weeks, multiple government agencies simultaneously released new policies related to military recruitment and wartime medical supplies. These policies encourage university students, especially graduating seniors, to join the armed forces. This has sparked renewed concerns that Beijing is accelerating preparation for a military invasion of Taiwan. And also at Beijing's International Airport, all advertising screens have been replaced with a red display featuring two gigantic characters. Actually, I have these for you. Actually, Chris found the video. Where's the video? Here's the video. Here's the video taken from Beijing Airport, the capital airport. Right? It has two characters, reunification, and the small text reads, defending national sovereignty and safeguarding unification. The intended message is chilling. Professor Yuan Hongbin believes that, let me come back. Yeah. Professor Yuan Hongbin believes that a historic final showdown between the United States and the CCP regime is inevitable. The reason is simple. The ideological clash between Xi Jinping's authoritarian expansionism, his vision for a community of common destiny for everyone, and Trump's vision to make America great again, is a fateful rivalry that cannot be resolved through negotiation or diplomatic strategy. And in that duel, the United States holds the upper hand due to the size of its economy and the strength of its military, as well as its growth potential. So Xi Jinping's only remaining card, if economically cornered, is to launch a military attack on Taiwan. However, a major obstacle exists. That is the ongoing political purge within the PLA, which we've discussed extensively. I've done so many programs. So for those of you who just joined our live stream, you can take a look at my previous programs on the subject. So there's a massive political purge that's going on in the PLA. And because of this, Xi Jinping does not yet have the stability and the control required to launch a full-scale war in 2025. But according to Yuan, a military invasion of Taiwan by 2027 is highly probable. But I think the reason we're hearing so much war narratives in Beijing is because the regime needs to justify a full rationing system. So Beijing needs to promote war and makes it look like it's imminent. And so the blood red unification slogans flooding Beijing capital airport is a psychological warfare designed to project a sense of inevitability. I don't think the CCP will launch a war this year. I agree with Professor Yuan. Definitely not this year. If you haven't watched my live stream on April 12th, which was the past Saturday, you should, because it gives you the full detailed information about PLA's latest military drill. If the PLA can barely put together a military exercise, it's far from being ready for war. So everything we discussed tonight is based on information from one source. Again, we need to ask the question: how credible is it? Here's Professor Yuan gave a detailed explanation of his sources, and I explained that in my April 12th program. I won't repeat that. But here's what I want to say. You won't hear this type of information from mainstream media, and there's a reason for that. Conscientious insiders within the CCP who risk their lives to leak these materials would never go to mainstream outlets. They release information only to people they trust. And that's where Western media faces a serious disadvantage, in my opinion, when reporting on China. Many outlets have operations in China, so they're subject to the opinions of the CCP, and they're too close to the CCP leadership. Some have even hired the children of CCP operatives. So, because of their high profile status and entanglements, they're simply not trusted by those risking everything to expose the truth. That's why we often have no choice but to rely on dissidents like Professor Yuan to obtain information, because he doesn't speak for the establishment, and that's exactly why he's trusted by whistleblowers inside the system. And he's not the only one. There are quite a number of them. Mainstream media outlets occasionally report major revelations about China, but those usually come from, in my opinion, two sources. One is U.S. intelligence operation, right? It's U.S. intelligence leaks, or official Chinese sources trying to shape a certain narrative. But both, whether it's U.S. intelligence operation or Chinese sources, they intentionally leak information with certain purpose. So the reality is, when it comes to uncovering what's really going on inside China, unfortunately, mainstream media often lags behind. So that's all I will say. Wow, we have 6,000 people online. That's excellent. I think this is record breaking. All right, let me see if people have any questions for me. All right. I will post the link to the original the link to the interview that Professor Yuan gave, in which he explained all of this. It's in Chinese. I'll provide the link after this live stream. All right, let me see if people have any questions for me. I think this it explained. I mean, in my opinion, it explained a lot of things that we're seeing coming out of China. So it makes total sense to me. I mean, it's difficult to verify that. I mean, it's impossible to verify this information. So we can only, apply logic to see if it makes sense. All right, no question so far. Oh, here's a super from Van Cat Lay. Congratulations for this new record. Well, thank you. Please, so for those of you who join, if this is the first time you join us, please subscribe if you haven't done so. I try my best to give you the most comprehensive and insightful analysis of China news. So if you haven't subscribed, I suggest you do that. Thank you. Okay. Everyone is stunned. No questions. No questions, no comments. All right. I want to thank the people who gave me super stickers first before reaching any questions. I think that's all.